Hey guys, welcome to Cooking with Chase. Hope you're enjoying the little staycation there. Today we are continuing on and finishing our two-part series on stocks and soup. So grab a drink and let's get cooking. Okay, so if you missed yesterday's episode, we talked about making chicken stock. If you missed it, not a big deal at all. You can grab a pre-made stock from the store, like this. For doing a soup like this, if you can get it, the actual stock is a little nicer than the bouillon. And again, just like the tomatoes we talked about earlier, anything you can avoid buying without salt is better. Like we can control it, I've said this before, but you can control your own seasoning, and they can sneak a lot of sodium into these things, and you won't even really taste it. So it's just a little healthier, and again, mostly it's just for we're the ones cooking. We don't need to worry about Campbell seasoning our food for us. But if you did watch yesterday's video, you are in for a treat because you will now have a beautiful homemade chicken stock. So we're going to talk about, you now have all this chicken stock, and it's delicious and glorious, and you say, what do I do with that? Well, I'm going to show you a very quick soup that you can do with some stuff that hopefully a lot of us have in our cupboards right now. This is, again, not really a recipe, but more of just a guideline or a technique. You can switch out a whole bunch of these ingredients for different things. And I'm going to show you how quick it is, how fast it is, and kind of the way I would go about doing that. So we're going to be doing a lentil, green bean, I've got some pasta, and then the shredded chicken from making our stock. So for context, I had 2 small chickens. They were a couple pounds each, and I ended up with about 2 pounds of meat. So I'm going to use a small amount for the soup today. We'll probably end up freezing a little bit of it, just keeping it in the fridge for sandwiches or wraps or something like that. So you end up with a good yield of just nice shredded cooked chicken to keep in the fridge, which is always great. So the first part you're going to want to do is get a little bit of olive oil in a pan or a small pot. Actually, the first thing you want to do is drop the pasta. And again, just like we talked about in the pasta video, you want to season your water. This, you don't have to go quite as generous because the soup itself is quite seasoned, and the pasta is going to absorb a little bit of that liquid as it sits in the soup. So just lightly season the water. When you're cooking a pasta, you're kind of glazing the noodles, and the pasta is so thick there's not enough liquid to kind of hydrate the noodles anymore. This is they're sitting in liquid. And we're going to have quite a well-seasoned soup, as your food should be well-seasoned. So that some of that water is going to get absorbed into the pasta a little bit. So you don't want to go quite as heavy in the salt into the water, just a tablespoon or so. Take this off. Give your pasta a little stir in the beginning so it doesn't stick to the bottom. And you can use any type of pasta. I wouldn't recommend like a rigatoni, like a really big noodle, just because it doesn't fit on your spoon very nicely. But if you had a spaghetti, that would work. Linguine, anything like that. Those small little bow tie pastas or elbow, any small shape works really, really well for a soup. You could also do rice. If you had some leftover rice, you can put that in the bottom of the bowl, just to kind of bump up the carbohydrates and the starch. The reason why I'm cooking the noodles in a separate pot of water as opposed to boiling them in the chicken stock is you've either paid for or worked very hard to get this beautiful chicken stock, and a lot of that flavor is just going to absorb into the noodle, and you lose a ton of broth. It doesn't really make the pasta, the noodles don't taste better having absorbed that chicken stock because you're getting the chicken flavor from the broth anyway. So this is a way to stretch your broth a little further, save some money by not having to buy so much stock. Because if you look at how much water is in this pot, that's how much stock you would need to be cooking these noodles in. And then all of that stock's going to be lost as they hydrate. So you're better off just having them cooked off to the side as opposed to cooking them in stock. So the next step is you're going to get a pan with a little bit of oil. Get that oil nice and hot. And you're going to get some garlic and some onions going. Again, you can just roughly, this is going into a soup, so you can just roughly chop this garlic. And I'm just going to slice my onions. And I mentioned this to my sister-in-law Laurel. Whenever you're kind of cooking with onions that aren't getting pureed, a lot of people have the tendency to slice them this way, against the grain. You're much better off slicing them with the grain. So when we talk about with the grain of onions, you can see those lines? That's how the onion grows in the ground. Comes up at the top. I'm going to slice with that. They'll stay together and they feel a lot better, and your slices will get more consistent. When you slice them like this, across this way, you end up with a very big onion ring and then a very small piece in the beginning. So there's no consistency in your sizes. So going like this, you end up with fairly consistent slices of onion, which is just nicer to cook with. It looks better, it eats better. I'm just going to quickly slice this up. They don't have to be this thin. If they're that thick, that's fine. I like my onions thin, but again, not. So what I'm doing right there is, this is round down here, so my hand isn't stable. So I'm just turning it around to give myself a more level spot to finish that cut. And then again, just slow down as you get close to your fingers. Boom, sliced onion. So, pick up your onions, give them in your pan, turn up your heat a little bit. Okay. Turn up your heat a little bit. I'm just going to season this. A little salt, a little bit of pepper. And we're going to quickly slice up a little bit of carrot. And a lot of people I've talked with before, I just wash this carrot. It's really clean. I'm not worried about peeling it. It's fine. So you can julienne this or make a really small dice. The best way I found to kind of deal with the shape, because it's very hard to get similar sizes, is just slice it and you just turn it. What that gives you is these really nice little organic shapes. The whole thing is, if you can't do something perfectly, just let the food be the food. And you're looking just for the same size so it cooks evenly, right? So you're just kind of turning it a third, halfway, a quarter, it doesn't really matter. You know, and this is great if you're going to roast carrots, do anything with it, especially carrots that are really thick at one end and taper down. This is the best way to get nice consistent sizes. And you end up with these really nice beautiful shapes. They fit on the spoon nicely. Just put that off to the side. So my onions are going here, starting to get some color on them. At that point, you want to add your garlic. From there. I'm going to add the carrot. Just because the carrot is most root vegetables, they take the longest to cook. So you want to get them in as quickly as possible into your, when you're doing your cooking. Give that a little stir. And I know we added a ton of onions to the stock yesterday. We're going to strain all that out. This has been cooking now for almost 24 hours at this point. There's no nutrients. There's no flavor. There's nothing left in the bones, the carrots, any of the vegetables that have gone into the stock. They have served their purpose. And don't feel bad about wasting them. You know, it's you pulled everything out. You know, you've used more of this chicken than most people will ever use of any chicken, especially in a kitchen or at home. So, kind of losing, well, you're not really losing, but you feel like you're throwing out a couple of onions to create the flavor. They've done their job. They have worked very hard for you. Okay. So, with the onions, you're not looking for anything crazy. You have a little bit of color, cooking on pretty high heat. They're kind of starting to go translucent. We're good with that. Because remember, we're adding stock to this and we're going to be boiling it. So we don't need to cook them all the way. They will finish cooking as we boil it. So at this point, this is some of the shredded chicken from yesterday. Add a little bit of this chicken in there. Always miss the pan when you're putting ingredients in. Remember that. And then we're going to add our stock. So look at that thing of beauty. I'm just going to grab a lid. Let's keep an eye on that stock there. Yeah, so at this point, all the vegetables have cooked down. You've got a nice thick layer of fat on top. The color has changed to a deep, deep golden brown. And these bones are so cooked that they'll just turn to mush, right? Which is exactly what you want. You know they've completely extracted every little bit of flavor. So we've got our soup here. I'm not going to strain this because it takes a little bit of time. So I just wanted to show you guys what it would look like before you strained it. I'm just going to do enough for kind of what I'm doing today. And I've just got a little sieve there to catch all this stuff. I can't tell you how nice that's been just having the stock simmering away in our house for the past day. Kind of work the sieve a little bit, try to get every little bit. You've worked really hard for this flavor. You don't want to waste any of it. Use the back of the ladle to kind of push down through. And you'll end up with just kind of this chicken paste. We're going to discard. And you can see the shine on the top and all the oil and the fat. Leave that. If you're really sensitive and you're really too fat and you want to strain it or skim it off the top, you can. That's really where most of the flavor lies. So for us, we're just going to let it go. I'm just going to check on my pasta real quick. See what we're at for cooking. Almost there. At this point, I'm going to take a sip of beer. Cheers, guys. So, we're going to do lentil today. You could easily do chickpeas. You could easily do red kidney beans. Whatever canned product you have in your cupboard right now would absolutely be great. We had some frozen beans in our freezer. Frozen beans, totally fine. And I just put these in frozen right away. I don't need to saute them, but now the water's kind of coming up. Throw those beans in there. You can chop them up. I probably should have, thinking now. But that's okay. You just have a whole bean now. Great. At this point, I'm just going to check it for seasoning. Okay. Not bad. So we're going to rinse off these lentils. One thing I think people don't do enough when they're dealing with canned beans is you really, really need to rinse them super well until that water runs clear. They cook them, basically they pack them in water hot. They pack them hot whenever you're canning. So there's a little bit of cooking that still happens, and a lot of that starch gets mixed into the water, and it tastes super gummy and it's kind of bad. So it's cold water, and you can see how starchy that water is down there. You really do not want to add that in. Again, make sure your colander is too small, so you lose some lentils down the sink. That is... But the water is starting to run clear, and I'm going to go on this for another 10 seconds. And I'm just moving this around, trying to get that water to run. Because again, if I had a bigger colander, I'd kind of be working with my hands gently. But I can't do that because my strainer is too small. So that should be good. I'm just going to leave them in here. Place that over to bowl to continue draining. Check my pasta. Pretty close. Yeah. So the pasta's good. I'm just going to drain this. soup is going here. Basically done. The lentils are completely cooked. Like they're, don't need anything else. The pasta, this is something that again happens a lot with when you're adding starch to a soup. This pasta's cooked now. If we add all this in, if you're making a big pot like for the family, and it does not get eaten, you just put it back in the fridge, full of pasta. The pasta will continue to absorb until you get these giant, soggy, floppy noodles. Same with rice. All your broth will be gone absorbed into that rice. So whenever you're serving it, keep your rice and your pasta separate from your soup. Your vegetables can go in. They won't absorb anymore. But the starch and like the lentils or the rice or whatever kind of starchy thing you're putting in there, just have that in the fridge. You don't even really need to warm it up. Your boiling broth will heat this, and just put some in the bottom of your bowl. So this pasta could have been cooked yesterday. That's fine. These lentils could have been in the fridge. That's fine. I'm just going to show you how I would build this bowl. So, there's a little bit of pasta. This pasta, by the way, is from Bulk Burn. It's awesome. It's really, really nice texture, really nice mouthfeel. It's super cheap. Again, spill some lentils. There. And this we're just going to go for a final seasoning of the soup here. Just need a touch of salt, just a touch. And what it really needs is just a little shot of acid. So I was talking to my brother the other day, and we were talking about how a lot of times when you start cooking, you think something needs more salt, but what it actually needs is acid. So if you're ever feeling like, this dish, whatever you're making, a soup, a tomato sauce, anything, it needs something, and you're adding salt, and the salt doesn't seem to be doing anything, just try a shot of white wine vinegar or red wine vinegar or lemon juice to the dish, and taste it again, and that acid might brighten the whole thing up and correct whatever thing you're missing. So I'm just going to go and be really gentle with this. Like I'm literally 21 drops. That's it. 21 drops. You shouldn't taste acidity. It should just be a little brighter. When they're talking food shows and being all snooty, perfect. When they talk about food being bright, it's really what they're talking about. It has acid. Okay, so we've got our bowl of soup here. Just as a side note, when all this is done, you're having a dinner party, you can prep these bowls and have them just out with all your noodles and your lentils. And when you want to serve your guests, come along, fire them up, out to the table. When you're trying to make things look fancy like this, you always scoop the ingredients out of the soup and then pour your broth on top. Or just get a big ladle and just fire it right in. Whatever you want to do. And then there. Perfect. And because, we're doing a cooking show and kind of, again, mentioned it was my fiance's birthday the other day, and we had a nice little lunch, and I made just a little salsa verde, green salsa, green olive oil and herbs kind of deal. I'll make over this at some point, but this is basically pureed herbs, garlic, white wine vinegar, and olive oil. I'm just going to place some of that on top because we have it. And I'm going to finish this whole thing off with just a little bit of cheese. Not so much that it needs it, and you don't want it stringy or anything like that. But just add a little bit of richness. And there's no cream, there's no butter, or anything like this. It's all this seasoned with a little bit of chicken fat and a bit of olive oil from the cooking. Right there. And again, in 20 minutes, if you have this stock ready, right, you've gone from nothing to a very beautiful homemade bowl of soup, some fresh vegetables, some canned stuff, right? We're using what we have. We're avoiding going out to the grocery store. If you had bell peppers, great. If you had cauliflower or broccoli, also fantastic. If you want to make this vegetarian, don't make chicken stock, but take a veg stock and omit the chicken. Be that same process of starting with some onions and some garlic, building that flavor, adding your veg stock, adding your vegetables. If you have some fresh herbs on top.
Would pesto work in place of the salsa verde if you wanted to?
Pesto would be wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah. And you mean, yeah, pesto would be great. So this is a very quick, if you minus the time it takes to make the stock, chicken soup with some vegetables. And thanks for tuning in, guys. If you're cooking along or making the recipes, be sure to tag me at Chase Rose or hashtag Cooking with Chase. Stay home, stay safe, eat well, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.